We want a primary focus in this meeting on shutting the nuclear plants in New York. The governor Cuomo says he's going to help shut Indian Point. I don't believe him. And he now has laid out a $7.6 billion, I mean, it's hard to say, a $7.6 billion handout for the four. The industry did get up, and there are about 430 or 440 reactors in the world, depending on how you count the ones in Japan. We have had 7 meltdowns or explosions, or both, at commercial reactors in the world. The first meltdown of major significance was at Fermi 1 in Michigan in October 5th of 1966. That was a fast breeder reactor. There was a meltdown there. Thank God it didn't explode. That thing had liquid sodium. It was cooled by liquid sodium. If it had blown up, there's a phrase, we almost lost Detroit. So the thing did melt, but it didn't explode. The second was at 3 Mile Island. And I want to emphasize, 3 Mile Island is a very hidden lesson in the importance of activism. Because 3 Mile Island Unit 2, people did protest. And there was one group, led by a woman in the area, they always are, who made it her specific issue to strengthen the containment at 3 Mile Island. If you've ever flown into Harrisburg, you fly right over the goddamn reactors. It's amazing. You look down, there they are. And her issue was that if you're going to put this reactor here, this is about Unit 2. She didn't get Unit 1, which is about to shut, by the way. But Unit 2, she demanded a containment strong enough to withstand a jet crash. And so, and she won on this issue. And so 3 Mile Island Unit 2 probably had the strongest containment of any reactor in the world because of this citizen action. And in 1979, on March 28th, when the thing melted, and they denied that there was a meltdown there for 9 years until they finally got a robot in there and were able to see that in fact it did melt. And there was a hydrogen bubble there, which the media was talking about. We don't know why. They know why the thing melted. They don't know why it didn't blow up. And one of the reasons it may not have had an explosion, catastrophic is not strong enough. The word is apocalyptic. One of the reasons they didn't have an apocalyptic explosion at 3 Mile Island was because the containment was so strong. And had this group of citizen activists not strengthened that containment, the whole Northeast could have been just completely Chernobyl, as they say. So the next one that blew up, of course, was Chernobyl in 1986, April 26th. And up until that time, the nuclear industry was extremely vehement in saying that a commercial reactor, come on in, could not blow up. They said it was physically impossible for a reactor to blow up. Then when Chernobyl blew up, they said, well, that was a Soviet reactor and it doesn't apply to Americans. Then when Fukushima units 1, 2, 3, and 4 blew up, they got quiet. They said, well, it was a tsunami. I was in Japan in the middle of the 1970s, and we marched against Fukushima, and we said in Japanese, what the fuck are you doing building commercial reactors in an earthquake zone that's washed by tsunamis? And they said, oh, don't worry, it won't happen. Not only did they say, don't worry, it won't happen, they took down the 85-foot cliff that they could have put the reactors 1 through 4 on that would have kept it out of the tsunami. And units 5 and 6 were left up high, and they were not washed over by the tsunami. So that's 7 reactors that have melted and or exploded. Unit 4, by the way, at Fukushima did not melt. It didn't have the fuel in it, but 1, 2, and 3. And these are General Electric reactors. These are American reactors, have a seat, please, that were built in Japan. General Electric design, General Electric contracted, and half the reactors in the U.S. are there. They built these reactors in Japan. They built them, of course, all over the world, and they got to 450 or thereabouts. We're now on the steep decline. Now, all the one good thing that came from Fukushima was that they shut the other 54 reactors. But they have a fascist government, and he's doing everything in his power to make Japan, to bring back the reactors and to get nuclear weapons, actually, in Japan. He's really not cool about this. So we have managed, or the Japanese people have managed to keep the other reactors shut. They've opened 2 or 3 or 4. They're trying really hard, but it's been 6 years. And a lot of things have happened in Japan, and hopefully we're going to keep these other reactors shut. So this is the biggest mass shutdown of reactors in the world, and it's a big deal. Fukushima is horrifying, and we do have time, and Carl certainly knows the detail. They are still leaking huge quantities of radiation into the Pacific Ocean. It's terrifying. And one of the reasons is the 3 that melted, they don't know where the cores are. We call it corium now. We don't know how hot they are. We don't know where they are, but we do know pretty much what they're made of. And Fukushima is here, and then there's cliffs and water that comes down and is constantly flowing through the site and constantly flowing through the site into the ocean at the rate of about 300 to 400 gallons a day at least, of very radioactive stuff that could conceivably be killing the Pacific Ocean. As it is, the radioactivity that escaped from Fukushima exceeds by at least a factor of 30 in terms of cesium the amount of radiation that was released at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the scale we're talking about. This is an apocalyptic event that's ongoing. So, in terms of when we first started, and Danny remembers this, Cora, many people, we weren't given a snowball's chance in hell of stopping this industry. This was supported by Republicans and Democrats. In fact, it still is. There's still many pro-nuclear Democrats, not with a small d, those are big D Democrats. And but we in our town, in the town of Montague, Massachusetts, we're a bunch of hippies on the hill. They came in offering tax breaks and jobs and entertainment and everything you could imagine. And we were just out there, and a guy from my farm, Sam Lovejoy, knocked over a weather tower, and we did stop them. We stopped these 2 reactors from being built. Where those reactors were to have been built, there is now a nature conservancy. Okay? So long story short, when Nixon announced 1,000 nuclear reactors in the U.S. by the year 2000, there were about 250 that either were online, under construction, or on order. And where is Nixon now that we need him? From the moment he said there'd be 1,000 reactors, the numbers started to drop, and the cancellations started, and there were actually no reactor ordered that came to fruition after Nixon's speech. Every single one of them was canceled, and since then reactors have shut. So from a max of 250 that were tangible and under construction and operating in '74, we plummeted down to 104 in 2000, and now they're 99. Okay, and in New York State, we have the 4 upstate, which Fitzpatrick, Ginna, and then 2 at 9 Mile Point. And they're all on Lake Ontario. And then we have the 2 here at Indian Point, just north of New York City. Our demonstrations against nuclear power have been extremely effective, and we have basically shut them down. Now I want to go quickly to the alternative, because it's important we understand what has happened now. We are in the middle of a spectacular technological revolution, which the anti-nuclear movement is in many ways responsible for. Because when we first started fighting them, these nuclear plants, people said, well, where are you going to get the energy if you don't have nuclear power? Where's the juice going to come from? There were starters on the technologies. Now, in 1975, in the town of Amherst, Massachusetts, so we had something there called the Toward Tomorrow Fair, and it was organized by a guy from my hippie farm named Frank Coster. And the discussion was on solar and wind, which were just tiny at the time. The physics behind photovoltaic cells, which translate sunlight into electricity, has been known since the 1800s, but the first panel was not built until 1953 or 54. There's no theoretical limit to how long a photovoltaic cell will generate electricity, but that's still going on. And so we were talking about that theoretically, and then we talked about the wind industry. Wind power has been around a while. There were thousands of windmills in the U.S. in the Great Plains during the Great Depression. Most were pumping water, but some were actually generating electricity as well. And weirdly enough, the New Deal killed them, but nonetheless. And finally, they had called a giant national rally to demand the shutdown of all Germany's nuclear plants. And then between the time they called the rally and the time they had the rally, Fukushima happened. And Angela Merkel, who actually has a brain, said, okay, you guys win, we're done. She apparently actually understood what happened at Fukushima. And so by 2022, in the world's fourth largest economy, all the reactors will be shut. That is, and they are going 100%. And they had what they did was they did what's called a feed-in tariff, and they hugely subsidized solar for a while. And the price of solar is so cheap in Germany now that you have entire cities that are 100% renewable. Not only that, but they're pouring out so much cheap energy from wind and solar in Germany that there are times, I know this doesn't sound credible, there are times when the utilities actually pay people to use electricity because it floods the grid. It's the grid that's the problem now. The grid's got to go. The grid is obsolete. We need a new, it's all going to be decentralized. But Germany, by 2022, will be 100% renewable, almost. There'll be some residual fossil, but it's happening. China is where the final decision is going to be made. The Chinese have about 36 reactors that they're thinking of building. There is, by the way, an anti-nuclear movement in China. There's a big debate in China now about whether to go to finish these reactors or completely abandon them. But the Chinese have jumped deeply into solar, to the point where they actually tried to corner the world market at one point. And they drove the price of solar. That's one of the reasons the price of solar went so far down. So if we can stop these last reactors in China, China will also go solar, and the whole world will tip over. I assume you're going to talk about Governor Cuomo and this $7.6 billion.
The central part of what I want to talk about is bailout, because it could easily creep across America and become not a $7.6 billion bailout, but $250 billion bailout. That's the figure I'm seeing. In any case, there might be a few people in the room who aren't familiar with nuclear power and the gravity of nuclear technology. Let me just start by telling you what Admiral Hyman Rickover said when he retired from the Navy in 1982. Now, this is the guy who was in charge of the construction of the first nuclear plant in the United States at Shippingport, Pennsylvania. It opened in 1957. And what he told the Committee of Congress, somehow he saw the light, Rickover did, that a few billion years ago there was so much radioactivity on Earth you couldn't have any life. And only when the half-lives of these radioactive poisons simmered down could life begin. And then he goes on, this is Rickover, not Greenpeace. By using nuclear technology, we are recreating the very poisons that precluded life from existing on Earth. And Rickover again, there I think the human race is going to wreck itself. And he goes on too in that, if you want to read the speech, you can Google it, but actually in my first book on nuclear power, Cover Up What You're Not Supposed to Know About Nuclear Power, I do several pages on that speech. And incidentally, you can get that book free online. Just go to my website, Carl Grossman, Carl with a K, Grossman.com. And then he goes on, for folks in the room too who are concerned about nuclear war, that when nuclear war breaks out, countries will use whatever weaponry they have. And in fact, any nation that gets a nuclear reactor, a nuclear plant, has then the material, the plutonium, and the trained personnel to have a nuclear weapon. In fact, that's how India got the bomb. Through the Atoms for Peace program, it got a reactor and boom, it had a bomb. Now, how I got into this all, I was an investigative reporter for the Daily Long Island Press. This is back in the 1970s. And Long Island, where I worked, was eyed for not just Shoreham. People think of just Shoreham. 7 to 11 nuclear power plants were to be built on Long Island. I wrote a book on this called Power Crazy. The reason you took a mile's walk across this island, across the East River from Manhattan and Ravenswood, a nuclear plant was to be built. This is 1959, 1960. In any case, the anti-nukers here got the city council to put together a resolution banning nuclear power plants within the boundaries of New York City. And Con Ed turned tail, stuck with its Indian Point plants, and Long Island was then eyed to be this, well, what the nuclear promoters described in those days as a nuclear park. See, a nuke needs a lot of water for coolant, 1 million gallons a minute. And here's Long Island, out Atlantic Ocean on one side, Long Island Sound on the other. A lot of water for coolant, and the idea was to provide nuclear-powered electricity, not just for New York, but for the entire Northeast, and pushed this plan by the Long Island Lighting Company and Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is one of the string of national nuclear laboratories in this country. In fact, for the last 15 years, the head of this utility, the Long Island Lighting Company, was William Catacasinos, former assistant director of Brookhaven National Laboratory. How nuclear power ended on Long Island, both these plants and the 2 reactors they had at Brookhaven National Laboratory, involved an umbrella strategy, which is what is needed now in terms of, we're going to get to the bailout in a second, what is needed now. Political action, legal action, civil disobedience. In fact, Newsday, for some reason, even though it ceaselessly crusaded for Shoreham and the 2 Jamesport plants and other nukes on Long Island, today, as a supplement to Newsday, has a front page from June 4th, 1979, protest at Shoreham, 15,000 rally, 571 are arrested. And that kind of thing, in a synergy with all the other stuff, ended nuclear power on Long Island. My son Kurt, in fact, was arrested on that day. He was one of the 571. Harvey was speaking about how nuclear power is uneconomic. Wind, solar power, I mean, the prices are just declining radically in terms of both. And the efficiencies, I have solar power on my house, 21% efficiency. We put it up 10 years ago, the photovoltaic cells. Now you can get solar panels at 24 and 25% efficiency. And that's the level of some of the photovoltaic panels out in space. And just incidentally, Harvey mentioned photovoltaics and NASA and the space program. Why NASA went to photovoltaics for satellites largely was because of the fall to Earth of the SNAP-9A plutonium-powered satellite in 1964. I've also gotten into nukes in space rather deeply. I broke the story in The Nation magazine after the Challenger blew up. The Challenger's next mission was to loft a nuclear-powered space probe, plutonium-powered, once it achieved orbit. That was to be made.
Can you explain efficiency, what you mean by 24% efficiency?
Efficiency is a mathematical description of how much sunlight hits the panel and how much electricity it's then able to create. NASA has been very happy with solar for satellites. The International Space Probe is solar. Unfortunately, and I keep writing on this, it's still pushing nukes for deep space probes, even though they're not really necessary. Last July, the NASA Juno space probe got all the way to Jupiter, just with solar panels. In any case, in this context, we have the upstate bailout. There's 4 nukes upstate, 9 Mile Point 1 and 2, Fitzpatrick and Ginna. They're uneconomic. Absolutely. Entergy was ready to get rid of Fitzpatrick. Then this deal was cut. Andrew Cuomo cut the deal. And Exelon, which is a big player, I mean, it's the big nuclear gorilla nationally. It's out of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel, when he was in Wall Street, put together this company, Exelon, very powerful in terms of lobbying, in terms of political action. For whatever reason then, and there's probably a variety of reasons, Andrew Cuomo put in a tier 3 to a program in New York State which was called 50 by 30. 50% renewable energy by 2030. That's great. That's great, though it could have in fact been 75%. I think it should be 100%. But then, subsequently, inserted into the plan, this renewable plan for New York State, was a provision for these 4 old, decrepit nukes upstate, which again, Entergy wanted to sell one of them, to continue to operate, Cuomo said, for the jobs, with us, state ratepayers, paying the tab. As of April 1, every ratepayer in New York State got a surcharge. Look at your bill. Got a surcharge on their bill. Just like what Harvey said, if this kind of money would be used to provide support for solar, I mean, this is the direction we have to go. Not nuclear, not at all. And I'll end here. The
Wait,
problem,
before you end, Carl, can you tell people, there is a lawsuit, can you tell us how many of you are New Yorkers here? So tell people what
here's
you
an
can do.
important lawsuit. It's been brought by, there's a whole laundry list of people. And in fact, here is the, next week, there's going to be a preliminary hearing on this lawsuit. Clearwater, bunch of excellent organizations have brought this lawsuit.
Yeah.
And this is in fact the affidavit, which is the key, by David Luckbaum, who works for the Union of Concerned Scientists. Part of the baloney, a big part of the bullshit of the nuclear establishment, and it's more than just the industry, it's the government and industry working together, the National Nuclear Laboratories, the Department of Energy, and so forth, and those in the nuclear industry. These days has been, nuclear is good because nuclear plants don't emit greenhouse gases. I mean, they used to say it would be too cheap to meter. Through the years, there have been various sales pitches. But what you have to, if somebody ever says that to you, say, yeah, but what about the nuclear cycle? What about the nuclear chain? Mining and milling and enrichment, which are very, very carbon intensive.
And the waste.
Nuclear power is not a green technology. Solar is, wind is, and so forth. But in any case, that's the line. And if you want to look, anybody would like to look, it's an excellent affidavit by David, who was in the nuclear industry until he saw the light. In fact, he even worked for the NRC for a while, about nuclear plants. And then he gets specific about Fitzpatrick and some of these others upstate being emitters of carbon. So that's been the excuse beyond the job issues, and it's...
So here's the deal.
Coordinating a refusal to pay the surcharge?
Excuse me?
Refuse to pay the
Anyone
surcharge.
That should be done, this lawsuit, which is again happening. I don't know how it'll go. The claim here in the lawsuit, I have it here, is that the imposition of the Tier 3, based on nuclear power being green and clean and renewable, so it could then be part of the 50 by 30. There's also some strong activities occurring now in the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate, attempts to stop the Cuomo bailout. And just let me add one thing. On Indian Point, which Andrew Cuomo, was part of the deal with Riverkeeper and others to close, 1 in 4 years, 1 in 5 years. There's a provision in the deal, just like what Harvey was saying, for retraining of the workers so they could, in fact, the New York State, its Energy Research and Development Agency, NYSERDA, would train these folks in solar and wind so that they wouldn't lose their jobs. The same could happen with the 4 upstate nuclear plants. The 2,000 jobs that are involved could be converted into jobs in green energy.
I'll make this quick. My name is Greg Palast, and I am a reporter for Rolling Stone magazine, BBC, and formerly was the investigative reporter for The Guardian, and now also with Democracy Now! But before I was a journalist, I actually had a job. I was a white-collar crime investigator, and my specialty was a group of racketeers known as the nuclear industry. I did this work for the United States Department of Justice, for the state of New York, county of Long Island and attorney generals all over this nation. So that's what I did. I was an investigator. And back in 1986, I obtained about 50,000 documents from inside the files of the companies that built the Long Island Lighting Company's Shoreham nuclear plant. And what I got in these files, they would say under oath one thing, and to the public, how much the plant would cost, how safe it was, etc. And they weren't just stupid. They didn't take 16 years and spend $8 billion and throw it down the drain because they were stupid. This was programmatic. And I took this to the Attorney General of New York and I said, this is an unusual thing, but there's a law that's aimed to put mobsters and mafia in prison. And I think I found the new mafia. They're the radioactive mafia, and they should be charged under the... Can we charge corporate executives under the law meant for mobsters? And the great Attorney General at the time, Bob Abrams, said, well, if they act like mobsters and they steal like mobsters, then they should go to prison and pay like mobsters. So we brought a racketeering influence, corrupt organizations, RICO action against Long Island Lighting and their builder, Stone & Webster, now Shaw and Company. And we found, for example, that the company that built Shoreham and its sister plant at Fukushima had lied about the ability of these plants to withstand seismic events, which you might call earthquakes. Okay? So in this jury trial, we presented the information that Fukushima could not withstand an earthquake. This is 1988. Nor could the Shoreham plant. And that they lied, and that had consequences in terms of the cost and everything else. And the jury did find them liable. The result was a verdict of $4.8 billion against the nuclear industry and the company. And then there was this politician who stepped in to save the company. His name was Mario, I can't remember his last name. And he contacted the judge, and we ended up settling the case, but still, for $400 million. But the company did go out of business, was replaced by a public company, and of course the Shoreham nuclear plant was shut down after they deliberately and viciously irradiated it for 1 day. 1 day.
So Greg, what we need you to do now is to go in there and find how to shut these 4 reactors upstate.
So let me tell you something else. Yes, 2 days ago, I was having lunch with some people from this wonderful legal team and the president, Alec Baldwin. And
Can you purse your whips?
and I said, I've been holding the files for 20 years because their files, which said that not only was the Shoreham plant that Fukushima built dangerously, knowing that they were endangering lives, people would die. But I also have the information on the 9 Mile nuclear plant. And that was in the jury's findings, that they lied about that they committed fraud and racketeering in the building of the 9 Mile plant. But the 9 Mile county government didn't want anything to do with the case. So it was kind of like, that was just like brushed off the table. Everything was about Shoreham. But I've kept those 9 Mile files where the racketeers that call themselves Long Island Lighting were training the upstate utilities, literally running a class in fraud and perjury. Here's how you lie to the regulators. Here's how we did it. Here's how you get away with it. I literally have those inside documents.
So can you break that story tomorrow?
What we need to do is we're going to take these files. So I said I've been waiting to give out these files and use them. And today is the day. That was 2 days ago. So now, 48 hours later, I'm saying, yes, yesterday I spent several hours with the legal team. And you have Mario Jr. as your governor. My condolences. He wants to run for president. Okay.
Of what?
But maybe, okay, but first I think he should serve his time. And because what he's promoting is a lie, a dangerous lie. and one of the lies, by the way, is that he will save jobs. Excuse me, one of the other things I did before as a reporter, I was the labor union negotiator for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Utility Union, the Utility Workers Union of America, Steelworkers Utility Division. I represented and I fought for these guys and their jobs, and they didn't give a shit about them. Nothing. There's less than 200 people that are needed to run one of these radioactive kettles. It would be more jobs to be created by decommissioning them instead of irradiating their workers. And there's something else that this guy, Andrew, has forgotten and would love to forget, but I'm going to remind him. The state of New York paid me no small amount of money to create an economic model of this state to see what the effect of nuclear power operation would be, including these charges for the bailout of these plants. And what I came up with was a macroeconomic program. I'm going to have to update it and fix it and blah, 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 which I will and must do. But I can tell you right now, right this minute, I just did a calculation that there will be 34,014 jobs lost because of this nuclear surcharge. Who do you think that the Tooth Fairy covers this bill, Mr. Cuomo? It comes out of the industries who moved upstate to get cheap power because of Niagara Falls, and now they're going to be melted down by these surcharges. And everyone in this state, every municipality is going to lose money. They said when some municipalities complain, they said, "Oh, we'll exempt you. We'll just charge everyone who doesn't scream." How about that? They did that. And so here's the thing: you're going to lose 34,000 jobs in the state if this goes through. Jobs. It's not free. I predicted in that model that Grumman, the biggest employer on Long Island, will move to Los Angeles. They're there now because they get cheap DWP, Department of Water and Power, public power. I said every plastics plant on Long Island would move to go to Tennessee, and they're at the Tennessee Valley Authority. There are no plastics plants left on Long Island. There are none.
So
Okay,
one of the
here's
calculations.
the deal.
One of the calculations. In Buffalo, this is very tangible, and we're doing this because we want people to sign up and help with this. Priscilla's here. There are places to sign up. If he takes $7.6 billion, that's a tangible amount of money that's going to come out of the state economy. Now, in Buffalo right now, Tesla is building what's called the Buffalo Billion Factories. Anybody heard of this? So it's $750 million of state money, and it's going to put 500 permanent jobs and at least another 1,400 spin-off jobs for this $750 million investment. If we take the $7.6 billion and build 10 Buffalo Billion factories, do the math. What we want is, what they're building in Buffalo is solar roofing shingles, right? Which is a really great technology. The five basic industries you want to see: solar roofing shingles, solar panels, LED lights, wind components, and batteries. Now, the biggest building in the world is now going online outside of Sparks, Nevada. It's a Tesla battery factory. Now, all these guys ache and moan about how the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. What is that? Well, the batteries are going to fill that gap.
What kind of batteries?
They're lithium iodide, but there's other technologies out there. If that $7.6 billion, instead of bailing out these ridiculous nukes, went to 7 Buffalo Billion factories, you'd wind up right off the top with tens of thousands of jobs. Those reactors were shut, and believe me, one of them is going to blow. Those are really old, really bad, decrepit reactors.
For a showing of the film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And it's a film that tells you this cannot happen. That tells you about how Trump stole this election, because this shit don't go down unless you steal the votes. You can't steal our economy, you can't steal our state, you can't irradiate our kids unless you can also steal the votes. And this is at the core of it.
All right. My name is Paul Durienzo, and one of the reasons I'm coming, thank you. I have a show on WBAI every Thursday at 6:30 called Trump Watch. We're having a lot of fun with it, and we're really finding out a lot of stuff about Mr. Trump and his associates. And so if you want to listen, we're really finding some interesting things about him and his connections, and the truth about his connections, not with Russia per se, but with the Russian mafia mobsters, as well as mobsters from the United States and many other places, which was interesting because we're talking about mobsters and the nuclear industry and organized crime, and how the nuclear industry is in many ways related to organized crime. So I'm going to tell you the story. One of the reasons why I'm here and why nuclear has always been an interest of mine is my father, Paul P. Durienzo, was the person who pretty much invented the cooling system of the nuclear reactor and built the first true nuclear reactor, and was the chief engineer on maybe the first 30 or 40 nuclear reactors ever built in the United States, and many that were built in other countries around the world. And he used to always complain, "When you try and get my security clearance pulled," he would go to me. And he worked for a company called Burns and Rowe. Ken Rowe, who was the son of the founder of the company, became a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and met, who became his very lifelong friend and associate,
You're asked to
Admiral
speak louder.
Admiral Rickover.
There we go.
Became his chief assistant. He became chief assistant to Admiral Rickover, and then left to form a company called Burns and Rowe, which still exists today, hiding from all the asbestos claims and other claims against it over the years, but is also involved in things like breeder reactors and all that. So I grew up going to nuclear reactors. I saw them under construction, and what was funny is my best friend from elementary school's father was often the chief foreman on the same projects my dad was the chief engineer on. And my dad's still around. He's 89 years old. His short-term memory, not so great. His long-term memory, great. And he tells me a lot of things. And so you should know some of those things, because you ask about 3 Mile Island, and my dad was the chief engineer in Oyster Creek 2. And you might say, there's no Oyster Creek 2. You're right, there's no Oyster Creek 2. Oyster Creek 2 became 3 Mile Island 1 and 2. And my dad refused to work on that project because he knew it was going to be dangerous beforehand. He was dragged into an office. Let me step back. I'll tell the story as briefly as possible. There's a place in Hanford, Washington, where they made plutonium, most 60 or 70% of all the plutonium for the nuclear bomb. They started with the B reactor, which I visited and toured. C, D, E, F reactors were called production reactors. They didn't make electricity. They just made plutonium for bombs, the first reactors. Then they came to the 9th reactor, the new process reactor. They wanted that one to produce electricity for the purpose of the public subsidizing the expensive production of plutonium. So every time that you turn on your electric light, the government would get more plutonium for its Cold War bomb-making projects. And this reactor, my dad was called in to build because the previous reactors had all been dumping their coolant right in the river. So the coolant came in and out directly in the river without any treatment, and it polluted hundreds of miles of the Oregon coast. It polluted the Columbia River to this day. It destroyed the fishing stocks along with the dams and other things. I mean, the poor Columbia River is the most beat-up river in America. And they dumped millions and millions of gallons into the earth, into the air, into the water. We have the downwinders who suffered from cancers and all kinds of other ailments in the area around. And I've talked to many of those and met many of the downwinders who were screwed just recently, just in the last few months. After 20 years of battling, they were totally screwed and lost because, let's face it, you can't prove a specific case of cancer was linked to a specific cause, at least not under the present rules. So, you know, part of the problem is we had national health insurance who would care. Everybody would have been treated anyway. But here you have to fight for your treatment money or you don't get treated at all. And they don't want to pay for millions and millions, thousands of people who were affected by radiation releases during the Hanford bomb production times. So they built the N reactor, and the N reactor was going to be a big advance. They were going to have a loop, and they have 6 loops, and each loop would then use river water to cool the loop, which would then cure the reactor, cool the reactor, and this would then provide electricity for the Washington Public Power Service, what became the Washington Public Power Service. It was the first WIPS 1, they called it. So this would be a big government project which would have benefit private industry, because in the end they never did sell the electricity to the public. In order to make the coal industry happy, the people, the predecessors to the Koch brothers of their time, they said they couldn't produce electricity for public consumption. That would be competing with private industry. So instead, they gave the electricity for free to private industry, including the Boeing Corporation, which got free electricity for years from the production of nuclear power in Hanford. The public didn't even benefit. In fact, the public electric bills in Washington State went up. The WIPS program went bankrupt, and it was the largest bankruptcy in American history. So, the largest bond default in American history. So, what did you have? nuclear weapons and nuclear power born together as one. As one. The problem was they had to put chlorine and other elements into the reactor, and I went to Hanford and I asked a 90-year-old guy who worked on the reactor, I said, you know, my dad told me they were putting chlorine and stuff on the secret side, and he was working on the non-secret side, and they weren't telling him this, and it was causing leaks, and the radiation was leaking into the ground, the strontium and cesium, and they told me, the guy yelled, wartime. It's wartime. During wartime, we do anything we want. You know, nobody questions it during wartime. Right? Simple as that. So nuclear power, nuclear energy, and nuclear weapons are totally linked together. So there's an interesting part to the story, and it links directly to 3 Mile Island. Because what happens was, the same exact thing, because my dad he didn't like it the first time, but he should have resigned. He tells me I should have resigned then, but I was sucked into it. They were sending me like James Bond all over the world. I was a hero. It was the most amazing job for a poor boy from Brooklyn whose father didn't even speak English, who went to public schools and went to Brooklyn Poly. This was the greatest thing. He was serving his country. That's what they told him, 1950s, early 1960s. He could be like one of these men around JFK, you know, the best and the brightest. He loved that. And didn't think he was doing anything bad at that time because there were and nobody was talking about the environment at all anyway. There was no question about the environment. Even when the first version they were going to build the first version of Indian Point 1 in Queens, right across from 68th Street next to the bridge. NYSERDA, which you mentioned earlier, started out as a New York Atomic Development Corporation. We took all the waste from the end reactor is in New York. Every bit of it. It was sent to New York because NYSERDA made a deal with the federal government in the 1960s that all the waste from that if they couldn't get enough commercial waste out in West Valley, New York, and on the Indian reservation, out in Buffalo, that they would take, the federal government would sort of apply it
So
to them. So they sent all the waste from Hanford to New York State. And they buried it, and it's leaking right now as we speak into the Great Lakes, right a few miles away from these nuclear plants. And the reason I know this is that I was working on this story and posting a few things on the internet. My phone rings one day, I pick it up, it's the head of NYSERDA. What do you know? We're trying to figure out what we own. We don't even know. He told me on the phone. The head of NYSERDA called me out of the blue. What do you know?
So how do we focus this on shutting these four reactors?
I just want to tell you that this is it. I'm into the waste, into where the uranium comes from and how it gets to the plant, and then where the waste comes after it's burnt. All right? I can't add, Carl, you guys, I've been following Indian Point. I know a lot about it. You guys are the experts on that, but I can tell you this. Don't trust the government for a heartbeat, because what they did to my dad, and to this day, he says, I can't believe it, how they used me. They used him because they didn't know anything about nuclear. They needed an engineer to sign off on their stupid plans to rebuild. Who are they going to get to sign off that it was safe to put Indian Point from Oyster Creek when it was built to be? Oyster Creek was built to be next to the ocean. And I'll leave you with this. At Oyster Creek, which is 90 miles south of here in New Jersey, which it could hit, it's not in New York State, but it could hit us if anything happened, and it's going to be operating until it's the oldest operating plant in the entire United States. My dad's proud of it. He says, look, it's still operating. Me and him went down there and got a tour of it. And so what happened was, when they were going to build it, because it's on the water, they were going to build a 10 or 20 foot thick concrete pad, right? And they were going to put the reactor on top of a concrete pad because it was right next to the ocean, right? So they decided to move it. The company ordered my father to move it. That's when he quit. He refused to do it. He said, it's unsafe. It'll melt down as soon as you open it up, he said. As soon as you turn it on, it's going to go down, right? And he said, I'm quit. He quit. He went on to work on coal-fired plants the rest of his career. And so he refused to do nuclear again. So when you go to 3 Mile Island today, right, and you find very little has been written about what really happened, right? But one of the things I found was, my dad would always say, why do you ask questions of people? I already told you what happened, right? But I have to, I'm a reporter, I got to get another source from it. So I found another source. Yeah, on top of a granite mountain, hundreds of feet above sea level, because the director of Penn Electric told my dad, you'll build it exactly as it is, exactly where I tell you to, like a lieutenant commander in the Navy, right? And my dad said, what are you going to do, take me out and have me shot or something, right? That's what he was thinking. He told me that. That's what he tells me. He said, If you go there today in 3 Mile Island, for some reason that nobody seems to want to explain, there's a 30-foot concrete pad underneath the reactor, even though it's on top of a granite mountain. The reason was they really did build it exactly like the guy ordered it. He said, build it exactly as it was built. It was supposed to be built. I don't want anything changed. Nothing. He said, I thought, and he looked at me and goes, nothing will change. Like that. And the first day, within 4 months of it opened, exactly what my dad said would happen. The reactors, when 2 separate reactors are built that are from 2 different plants, they're never the same. They're never the same. They cannot be compatible by definition. They have to be built for the spot. When they took one plant, moved it, and put it next to the other plant, it was saying there's going to be an accident, and they were warned it was going to be an accident, and the engineer refused to sign off on the move, and they did it anyway because they came from the military, and they ordered it to be done. Now, some engineers say there's a reason why that valve stuck on 3 Mile Island, that the mafia did it, because they didn't like the fact they were moving to a lower value wage area to build the plant, which is the reason why they moved it. New Jersey had the highest rates in the country, and they were shocked how expensive it was getting to build it, so they moved it to Pennsylvania because it was a lower value. And the union was a tough guy union that got the best wages, all right? And they always blame them for the sabotaging the plant. I don't know if that's true or not, all right? But that's been going around for engineers for a long time.
Let's hope nobody sabotages now.
All right, so the workers actually sabotaged the plant, it's been said. All right, but I don't know if that's true or not. But I can tell you this. If you dig under 3 Mile Island, you will find a legacy of that decision in a 30-foot thick concrete pad on top of a granite mountain instead of the beach where it should have been built. And that is why the accident happened at 3 Mile Island, because of a military command economy that says this is how we do things, and you do it whatever I tell you, and the hell with science, the hell with knowledge, the hell with studies. You just do it because we want to save some money, because the nuclear industry from day one was uneconomical. There was no way you can make a profit on it unless the government subsidized everything, and the whole thing has been corporate welfare to this very day, even as they do the Hanford cleanup, and there's still stuff leaking out every other day, collapse on the tunnel, leak of a tank, and down at the waste isolation pilot plant where the waste from the commercial, they don't even have waste for commercial plants. Where the military waste goes, it's leaking and exploding all over the place. They got kitty litter tanks, 55-gallon drums of kitty litter in it that explode and destroy the whole plant, so that's their defense waste goes. They have no place to put the waste from the commercial plants except out in Nevada, which they can't ever use. And now it's just sitting on top of the concrete pads at every single of these 99 nuclear power plants across America. And you know what they're going to do with it? And this is what everybody tells me everywhere I go across America. They're going to open up private dumps like WCS, which is owned by Rick Perry and others, the head of the Department of Energy. The waste dumps are all over Texas, the nuclear corridor of Texas, where people have been fighting it for years, and it's going to go next to, who knows, your communities and your neighborhoods, like it went to West Valley, New York, and they're going to dump it everywhere and anywhere they can. And that is really what's going to happen. I'm not predicting that's going to happen. That is what's going to happen. All right? Even if they close down the plants, all that waste is going to be a fight for all you activists. Forget the nuclear plants. Now we're talking about where they're going to bury the waste from the nuclear plants, which is dangerous for thousands of years. They're going to put down the street from you, down the street from you, up the block from you. That's where it's going to go, because that's how they've always done it.
What happened with the tunnel collapse recently?
Okay.
Yes, the tunnel question. The tunnel collapse, thank you. The tunnel collapse at Hanford occurred because what they did was they had railroad tracks, and they buried the railroad tracks with trains. And I actually have a friend of mine who's a source in Hanford. He's a really cool guy.
Okay, we'll have a speaker, so.
Yeah, I'm going to just answer his question real quick. Right, there's really this cool. What they did was they told me the documents from 1991. They buried the trains underneath the ground, and they put timbers over the trains, and then somebody signed off that it would never collapse, that the desert environment would never undermine the timbers. And then about 2 weeks ago, the undermined timbers collapsed, and the radioactive waste, which is buried on the train cars underneath the ground, which nobody who is a scientist or engineer would sign off on. They couldn't get anybody to sign off on it, it's safe. Buried, and that's what's being released right now. So let me leave don't blame the engineers who thought they were doing the job they were supposed to do back in those days, like my dad, he's really a good guy. Blame the people who lied and cheated and lied to the engineers and got them to sign off on stuff that they never would have signed off on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we want to focus again on shutting Indian Point and on these 4 reactors upstate. We want to stop this bailout. If you're interested at all, see me afterwards. Peter Weiss, please.